or a cup of chino? An espresso, anyone?
Eavesdroppin.
Hey ho, Michelle. Hey ho.
Hey ho, hey ho. It's 2025.
Two twits chatting. Is that what you were going to say?
No, I was trying to make some song about 2025. Didn't
Hey
work.
ho, let's go 2025. Is it that one?
Obviously, that very famous song you just made up on the spot.
Oh dear. Hey, welcome. Welcome to you, Michelle. Welcome to me, Geordie. We are together, Eavesdroppin, the comedy weekly storytelling podcast.
We are.
That's correct, isn't it?
It is real life. True
crime. Supernatural.
Supernatural.
We're a pair of fools, basically, who chit-chat. In case you just joined us, chit-chat about those three topics and more.
Mainly.
And more.
Yes.
And we have a host of listeners, we call them eavesdroppers, who have been with us for the whole ride. A lot of them have been here since the beginning. This is season 6, everybody. Go back and listen if you don't know.
Missed the first few on season 1 because...
Aren't they behind a paywall now, though, Michelle?
No, they're not. I keep threatening to do that. We never do.
No one cares.
We give everyone everything.
We give it all. We lay it out. We lay ourselves bare.
Better than laying one out, I would say, at this point. I know. It's gone wrong.
Already gone wrong. But I did want to say, Michelle, our eavesdroppers, aren't they an amazing bunch of people? Those who have just recently joined us or are just joining us today, I feel sorry for you. But just so you know, when we allude to these people, they're not our friends. They are our friends now, but they're not people we hired to write in. That's what I really want to make clear. They are people who found us through whatever means necessary on the old Apple podcasts, on the old Spotifys, and they have stuck with us and they've become our friends, haven't they, Michelle?
Well, if you are a patron, you'll know it's an eavesdropping family.
That's right.
We've got a song. You're all our family.
Welcome to our... Yeah, I can't remember that song. But we have one particular eavesdropper who's not very well at the moment. And this one has been so supportive to us. And we have to send a message to our lovely little Danny Bonaduce doppelganger, Safka, who has been poorly. So get well soon, Safka. We're rooting for you. Hopefully you'll be bouncing back in no time.
Oh no, our white witch is under the weather.
I'm
so sorry to hear that. And for anyone who didn't get the Danny Bonaduce reference, our gorgeous resident white witch, Safka, had sent in a picture of her as, I don't know, what, 7, 8 years old?
She
10?
was adorable, whatever it was.
The most gorgeous school picture. Her looking
She's like a Botticelli angel.
But she called it a Danny
Botticelli Duce.
Because we did an episode where I went off on a tangent.
A big old tangent. Didn't you? Do you know what she was talking about, listeners? Just in case you didn't hear that episode, she talked about the possibility that we are time travelers and we're coming back and meeting each other. And who was it?
When we
Leonardo
yes.
DiCaprio was somebody else. Was it Leonardo DiCaprio?
No, we had Eminem.
Oh, no,
Eminem
as some Roman emperor. It's a wild ride. Go back and listen.
Doppelganger special. And so Safka sent us in a picture of her looking the image of Danny Bonaduce, but Safka,
Not
so
quite.
much more gorgeous.
Absolutely.
So much more gorgeous. And I hope you get well soon. We're thinking of you.
Babes.
Yes.
Absolutely. She is one of our biggest supporters and she was ever so sweet when your mum was in hospital, wasn't she, Michelle?
She was doing spells, sending good vibes. In fact, all our eavesdroppers were behind Jen, who I will tell you, I mean, look, she's had a rough ride. Since she's come out of hospital, she's had skin cancers removed. She's currently undergoing chemo, but she's hanging in there.
What's the cream that she uses on her face?
FU Dicks.
FU Dicks.
It's actually chemo.
Oh.
Yeah, chemotherapy cream.
It should be called FU Cancer.
Yeah, exactly. FU Cancer. But she's on the FU Dicks. And so all the support we had for Jen, let's all divert that to Safka. Hope you're feeling better, darling.
Absolutely. And then there's the lovely Charlene, Happy Chappy, who we hear from quite a lot. In fact, I call her our unpaid intern. She will be paid one day, as will we, hopefully. But she always steers us towards some really good and really astonishing, mostly, stories. Michelle, she had an update about the Virginia McCulloch story that I told a few weeks ago in our Family Secrets episode. This is the woman from Essex who lied about her parents' deaths, which she was responsible for, and spent all their money for about 4 years before she got caught. And I did mention in the story that there wasn't a lot of info out there, how she was love bombing the florist and giving gifts. Well, It turns out, this is from Charlene, she saw a deep dive from a YouTuber called Emma Kenny, who said that in her story, she found out that Virginia would send gifts to her neighbours. And one guy said he received days worth of Chinese food, which he had to get a friend round to help him eat.
What?
I know.
What? That's just mad.
I want to know more.
A shantung chicken or a
Shantung?
beef and black bean?
Right.
Fine.
Yeah. But don't go the sweet and sour.
Oh, no.
Don't do that.
No.
That's rotten.
It's always rotten.
So rank.
It is, and they always put the capsicum in. That's about 6 days past its best. So it's all like
wrinkly,
slimy and wrinkly and
That's
gross.
a pepper for those of you who aren't Australian. Who calls it a capsicum in the world? It's just the Australians, isn't it?
Is it? No, surely.
I think so.
I think the Italians.
Do they?
What is it for Italian? I don't know.
Do some Italian, Michelle. Go on.
In what
No,
way?
she can't. She can't. Or just say the Italian word for capsicum or pepper.
I'm just trying to think.
She's going to
of it.
Google
I
it.
have to.
That's how Italian she is.
I'm such a fake Italian. What is it? Capsicum?
Capsicino. It's capsicum, isn't it? I'm calling it a capsicum. That's something my mum would do. Like onion with the UNG.
Or a cup of chino. An espresso, anyone? Cappuccino, yes.
An espresso or a cup of chino? I forgot about that. Or, of course, that famous meat, the processed meat. What's it called? Berliner, a.k.a. Berliner.
Oh, pepperone.
Peppers. Thank you. Yeah, so I think going back to what I said, Australians are the only people who call it a capsicum. Do you want to hear some postie news?
Have you got some?
I have. You know, I've got this new arrangement with Dan, the hot postie.
That sounds very saucy.
It does sound saucy. Sorry, Dan. This is quite a saucy convo, actually, a little bit. Because, you know, we've got this new arrangement. I fell out with the local post office lady.
She's a bitch.
So now,
No one knows this except for the patrons.
on our Patreon channel, there's a story where actually, if you want to be a patron, you can sign up and you can actually send us your questions for the next Agony Auntie session that we did. We did an Agony Auntie session for the patron this January. But in it, I mentioned that I fell out with my local post office lady. And now I've got a new arrangement with Dan, the hot postie, who you'll all know if you're a long-time listener. He now comes around. I buy the postage online. He comes around, as he always does, you know, usually dropping things off, but now he collects as well and gives me the little sticker to go on top. Well, I was returning some faulty toothbrush ends from a new company that is amazing, by the way. I won't name them because I want them to pay us, but they did swap out the faulty handles, and so I wrapped them up amongst other things and gave them to Dan. And as I handed it to him, he said, "Oh, why is it vibrating?"
No,
it was vibrating. It came alive in his hand. He got a bit of a shock.
Oh my God, he thought you were handing him a rampant rabbit.
I know, I had to explain. I said, "It's just a toothbrush. It wasn't a rabbit." But he also got upset when I told him that I actually have another hot postie in West London where I work. Everyone thinks he's the hot postie. They haven't seen Dan yet, but he wasn't happy.
No, of course
he
not,
wasn't
because
happy with that.
He's being ousted from the number one top spot, hot postie spot.
Well, the other guy, he's Italian, actually.
Ciao.
He's a bit younger, I'd say. And I think all the ladies that I work with find him quite, you know, the highlight of their day. Because he comes in
Do they
and
titter?
They titter every time. But the thing is, I've never had a hot postie before in all my days until now. I've got two at the same time. That's a record. I'd like to know if any of you eavesdroppers have a hot postie. And if you ever have had a hot postie. Or have you ever dated a postie? And it's women and men. They're not always men, Michelle. I've had a lady.
That's true. I mean, I remember when we were growing up, our postie would come on a motorbike.
Yes, that's right. My nana would sit out and wait for the little scooter. It's a scooter. Postie bike.
It was a postie bike, and we'd hear it. So you go, "Oh, postman's here." Yeah.
Like oh, hang on, I've got
That
this.
was it.
Was it like that?
And the kazoo.
That kazoo is going to come out more and more. So look forward to that, people.
2025 gift that keeps on giving.
The year of the kazoo.
You're the kazoo. We loved having the postie on the postie bike because
yeah.
you could hear it, but you never met them because by the time you ran out,
they had a helmet on.
Zoomed off. Yes, they had a helmet.
And you have a post box in Australia, a mail box.
You do.
Where they put the letters in. They don't come to your door. Although what happens with parcels? See, this was all pre-internet. I lived in Australia, so I don't know what they do about parcels.
Well, we had quite a big letterbox.
A cavernous box. Did you?
I think we'll find you had the cavernous box.
What a pair.
Dirty, filthy bitch. We had quite a large section underneath. So the top bit was for letters and the bottom bit was for parcels.
I can't even imagine that. That sounds like a huge piece of street furniture that's unattractive, actually, Michelle. I don't like it.
Well, it wasn't on the street. It was built into the wall. So it was very neat and very designed.
Compact.
Yes.
Like a cavernous box should be.
Yes.
Sorry. I don't know what's going on here.
It's because you've been talking about down the hot postie. Now you're talking about your large cavernous box.
Oh, yours, not mine. I don't have one. You're the one with the... She's only little, but she's got a... No, doesn't matter.
Does
Come
not
on.
matter.
Pull it together, girls. Blimey.
Don't talk about pulling. Geordie.
Yes, Michelle.
We have to move on from
Do
a hot
we?
postie.
From boxes and posties. Okay.
Look, I know we've been talking a lot about 80s stars recently.
Have we?
Yes, because we're doing Do They Know It's Christmas
George Michael.
and George Michael, and we had talked about Sting. Sting, yes, and his wife Trudy Styler,
Who everybody thinks you're her doppelganger. Don't say anything mean about her, please, Michelle.
she's an...
So mean.
I find it upsetting.
You don't see it.
Disturbing and not very complimentary that people think that I look like Trudy Styler.
She's a bit older, isn't she, Michelle?
Quite a fucking bit older. Thank you very much. And you know what? I had to look her up today because...
I'm going to look up her age just to make sure.
God, you bitch. Oh,
I just
my God.
need to know. She looks good.
Well, she's had so much bloody work. You should see her now. She's tight as a gnat's chuff, whatever that means.
I wish people wouldn't do that.
Do what?
A chuff is a vagina, Michelle.
Right. I didn't know what a chuff was.
You just used an expression and didn't know what it meant.
No.
Do you know what a gnat is?
A gnat. That's a
tiny
insect.
Yeah.
Yes. A gnat's chuff. Okay, I guess I hadn't really thought it through. She's had quite a lot of work done. But there's been some chit-chat about the whole tantric sex thing.
She's 71, so I'll give you that.
Fuck you. Thank you so much.
She is quite a bit older than you. Yes,
she
I
bloody
agree.
is.
I thought she was
is.
like 60-something or 55.
No, come on. They were young when Feed the World was all happening. So... yes, apparently Sting has come out and spoken about this whole tantric sex thing because, back in the 80s...
He said that it would last a whole weekend with dinner and a movie or something.
Oh, well, that's what he said now. He said the whole 7 hours was not made up. They still say, neither confirm nor deny that they're doing it tantrically. But he did say the 7 hours consists of dinner, a movie, and 5 hours of begging for it. So,
him.
Yes, begging Trudy for it.
5 hours.
I know, so I thought that was
He's
quite
king.
cute. Well, I mean, he must be in his 70s too.
Yeah, I'd say so. Shall I Google him as well? It took me ages to get Trudy's age up. Bloody hell.
Well, she's hidden that. She's buried it. You know, I have to say, I'm not sure he's
73.
73.
I wonder how old Stuart Copeland is. I love him. Oh,
Has he aged well?
who?
Stuart.
Copeland? I think so. I would still marry him.
You would still marry him, okay.
Yeah. And if you want to get in touch again, Stuart, because he did get in touch on the Instagram once.
Yes, he did.
I'm not sure if it was him or his PA.
Could have also have been
Someone not related to him
from
whatsoever.
Nigeria
Yeah.
trying to... Oh, my God. Speaking of scams, did you see that thing that's all over the news? I think it's a French lady gave 700,000 euros
Brad Pitt.
to the Brad Pitt lookalike, and it was so AI.
And it wasn't a lookalike. It just cut his face out and stuck it on somebody in a hospital with their thumbs up.
So obvious.
And then he's got his eyes shut and he's being operated on. Who takes a picture in the operating theatre?
I know. It was so obvious that it was fake.
Oh, that poor lady. And why would he need the money?
I know. He's Brad Pitt. What does he need the money for?
Because his divorce settlement was taking too long.
You know, and she divorced her wealthy husband.
No. To be with fake Brad.
Fake Brad.
Oh,
yep.
shit.
I know, it's really terrible. And I just think, be careful, people. The scammers. They're getting, well, they're not getting better because it was so obvious it wasn't Brad Pitt. But, you know, when you're desperate and you really think that some hot Hollywood actor is wanting to marry you, I guess you go a bit gaga, you lose your shit.
Yeah. Do you know what? I did say to you previously about AI, I have said it before, that it's time to make friends with it. It's here to stay, all of that stuff. And it can be helpful. It's helped me plan a holiday, for example. But I heard recently that it uses an incredible amount of water to operate, like a year's worth of a US state water bill or something. I can't remember my facts, clearly. I've got that wrong. But I think it takes a terrible toll on our natural resources to run.
And how does the water connect to the AI?
It flushes through it to cool it down or something. I saw it on Instagram. I don't know. I'll have to find that and dig it out for you. Put it in the notes.
Dig that factoid out, because...
But I do think it's interesting to know, like, why don't we know? Where does the recycling go? Why don't we know how meat gets on our table? Why don't we know certain things that we just take for granted? Like, how do they make a plastic bag? Where does the poo go? Can you wee standing up in the shower? Michelle says no, I say yes.
I think all of those things...
Are there two separate...
I thought there were two pipes.
Pipes. Separate the poos and the wees. Or the shower water and the wees.
There's a shower water pipe and a pipe for your poo. But apparently they all lead to the same place. So what's the fucking point?
Exactly. So go nuts, Michelle.
Go nuts. What, take a shit in the shower? What?
Not a shit.
What are you like? Geordie, you're disgusting.
I didn't say that. You said it.
Did you steal my scrunchie?
Oh, have a look in your hair bag.
Oh, sorry, pet. What was that? Now, for anyone who listened to last week's Telerex, I did mention a Telerex called Until I Kill You.
Oh, yeah.
We were watching it on Swedish TV, but it turns out it's on the ABC in Australia, it's on the BBC in the UK.
Yeah.
And fair dues here, I haven't even watched past the first episode, but I was so intrigued by the story of this woman, Delia Balmer, that I thought, fuck it, I'm going to do a story on this.
Okay.
So that's what I'm looking at this week. But because I haven't watched the whole series, and I tell you, I told Jen to watch it. She binged it in an afternoon.
She loves those murderous TV shows, doesn't she?
She does it. Where anyone gets killed or whacked, she's right on it. She watched it. She's seen more than me. She said it was good. So I'm hoping that it is. But instead, I watched a Channel 5 documentary called Surviving a Serial Killer.
Oh, shit.
I think it was called The Delia Balmer Story. So I watched that, and that's where I get a lot of my facts today.
Oh.
I'm just going to dive straight in, Geordie, because it's a one-hander today. There's too much here for you to chime in with another story. So we're going for it.
I've been bumped.
You've been
bumped. Let's do it. But before you start, Michelle, let's pause, collect ourselves, because I feel like we're in for a bumpy ride.
It's a bit of a rough ride here. I'll just start off by saying, trigger warning for those who need it. I'm not going to go into graphic detail.
Thanks.
The name of the documentary, Surviving a Serial Killer, there's a clue in there.
Got
all
it.
right?
Yeah.
When 40-year-old Delia Balmer decided to go to the pub on her own one night.
And good on her.
And good on her, because why not? I've done that in my single days. You never end up alone for long. And that's what happened to Delia. She met a man there that night, and she'd never, ever could have thought that this man would change her life. It was 1991, and Australian-born nurse Delia Balmer had just moved into a council flat in London, in Leighton Grove in Kentish Town. Now, although Delia was a nurse, she lived a bit of a bohemian life. You know, she loved to travel. She didn't have many possessions or much furniture because she just wanted to feel that she could just pick up her panties and go if she just wanted to trot off. So
I love that life.
Yeah, she did not want really more than a suitcase.
I can't do it. I've got too much baggage.
A family. Let's not forget that.
That's what I'm calling my baggage.
Well, she had no kids, you know. It was just her and basically a suitcase of clothes and barely anything else. But she moved into this council flat, And she was sort of currently in and out of nursing jobs, as she just left a hospital job that had taken her an hour each way to cycle to on her bike.
Cycling?
She's a cyclist, and it's 1991. She's that hippie type. And
No line bikes.
no, she just had a bike, no E. Just a bike. Also, it was the thick of Thatcher's Britain. Actually, it was more the tail end of Thatcher's Britain. Mass unemployment was still huge. She did find getting another job difficult. So she was a temp nurse, which meant she didn't have steady work, but, she would be called on to go into various hospitals. She didn't have a lot of money. She didn't have a lot of friends. But it was a bank holiday Monday in England, and she decided, fuck it, I don't want to stay home on my own. I want to go out. She wanted to have a little dance because she loved dancing. So on her own, she went to a pub called the Camden Castle to see a band. But it got too crowded for her because I will say Delia is, she's quite a quirky personality. Maybe I would say the BBC series in the first episode that I watched doesn't paint her in the most flattering light. I think they paint her as someone who maybe has some kind of spectrum, autism or something. So it's unsaid.
But is it actually her, or is it a dramatization of her?
It's Maxine Maxwell Martin, or whatever her name is.
Anna Maxwell Martin.
Anna Maxwell Martin, the one we talked about last week. She's playing Delia. They don't play her as a very sympathetic character in that first episode, but super interesting. She didn't have a lot of friends, but she didn't want to be on her own, so she went out for a drink. And it was a bit crowded at the Camden Castle, so she thought, fuck it, I'm going to leave here and find somewhere quieter. So she went round the corner to the Hawley Arms in Camden. We've talked a lot about the Hawley Arms, yes.
A favourite of one of our Eavesdroppin guest hosts, Christabel.
Yes.
She knows it very well. She's there every night.
Well, we've all been there. It was a Amy Winehouse favourite back in the day. And
Noel Fielding was always there whenever I went in.
Yeah, it was a real Camden sort of hot spot.
Yeah.
But this was before those days. This is in, 91. So she was at the Hawley Arms and it was quieter there. So she thought, I'm going to just stay here and have a drink on my own. A guy walked in, sat down at the other end of the bar to where she was and kept looking over at her. But Delia, she was not interested at all. And in her own words, she says, quote, I didn't want another disaster with another boyfriend. Yeah. So she just avoided looking over at him.
Can I pause you for a second there? The Hawley was also what people said that Baby Reindeer.
Yes.
The guy worked in the Hawley.
Yes.
Apparently.
There is a connection. If you look up Baby Reindeer and Until I Kill You, then you see they both reference the Hawley Arms. So it's quite a place.
Carry on.
Shit goes down.
Shit goes down.
Delia was not interested in this guy, but he did come over to her and, asked her, do you want to have a drink?
Sure.
And at this point, Delia was like, oh, what's the harm? I'll have a drink with this guy. It's someone to talk to. So he bought her a drink. He sat down. They began chatting. And that, Geordie, is how this big fucking mess all started.
Oh, dear.
So the guy's name was John Sweeney. And a bit like Delia, he was also sort of a bohemian artist type. Not bad looking, although I think you saw a picture of him and you thought he looked scary.
Yeah, I did.
But was that old him or young
old.
him?
Yeah.
Okay, young him, he wasn't bad looking. He was, not the best looking guy in the room, but he had something. He had that kind of quirky bohemian thing going on. A bit of a hippie. He apparently loved to sketch and paint, and there was definitely actually an attraction between these two.
All right.
He was brought up in Skelmersdale, just outside of Liverpool, and he was a skilled carpenter and tradesman and had a bit of an itinerant sort of lifestyle going on because John Sweeney was going from job to job on building sites around Europe and the UK, getting work where he could because, like I said, work was thin on the ground back in the 80s and the early 90s with the whole Thatcher Britain thing. And this kind of meant he never really settled anywhere in particular. He was 6 years younger than Delia, and Delia was 40 at the time. Delia had no job. She had no thoughts of having a new boyfriend. So after that drink, Delia was like, see you later, and not going home with you, and they went their separate ways. But 2 months later, the pair bumped into each other on the street, and he asked to meet up with her again. But she said, no, I'm too busy. But somehow he convinced her, and she ended up going out with him again.
Okay.
I will say that anybody who watches Until I Kill You, this story does not tally up with the story they've got on Until I Kill You, which has the bare bones of the story of what happened with Delia and John Sweeney. But Until I Kill You also says they do a dramatisation of some things, and they've added in fictional characters and whatnot. So
artistic license.
Whereas the Channel 5 documentary, it's actually Delia speaking.
Okay.
So that's why I've gone with from her own words here. Bumped into each other on the street. She wasn't interested, but he convinced her, come on, let's meet up again. John at this point was living in a squat on the other side of Leighton Road in Kentish Town, literally just around the corner from where Delia was living. I think proximity made them think this is kind of easy and fun. They just ended up seeing more and more of each other. And John was charming. You know, it seemed like he knew what to say to win Delia over. And within a few months, he ditched the squat and he was living with Delia in her very sparsely furnished council flat. And like I said before, without wanting to sound disrespectful, Delia was a bit of an oddball. Before she met John, she was, you know, somewhat isolated. She was alone. She didn't have a lot of friends. Her family actually lived in America, and she had this big flat all to herself. And I think John knew, here's someone that is kind of a loner. Yeah. And if I play my cards right, well, I can become the centre of this woman's world.
I would say it wouldn't be hard for him to come to that assumption when he walked into the Hawley Arms and there she was, an older lady. Well, I say older, she's only 40, but sitting there drinking alone in the 90s was definitely something that most people didn't really feel comfortable doing then.
No, it was unusual.
Yeah.
It's unusual behaviour. Look, Delia says of this time, and I quote, she says, I needed someone because I felt so alone. I thought he was helping me. Now, like I said before, to earn a crust, John was a carpenter, and he did help Delia with things like broken doors and windows in the flat. He even made some furniture for her out of scrap wood from the work sites he was on. You know, he made things like stools and a table and some cupboards for the kitchen. And he even made her a futon bed frame that Delia has to this day.
Oh, God. She still sleeps on the bed made by the ex.
Yep. And the thing is, too, he would do nice things for her, like, you know, sometimes he'd buy her flowers and chocolates. So bit by bit, Delia thought she was onto a good thing.
Yeah. He was doing all the right things.
Oh, yeah. But obviously it didn't take long before John's true nature came out, and he had a temper. He also liked to give her the silent treatment.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, just, you know, ignoring her, preferring to sit in front of a fish tank that housed his pet tarantula.
Ooh.
And he would just sit and look at that tank for hours, just drinking tea and smoking joints. He was wildly manipulative, controlling and abusive. And the first time Delia saw this temper was when it all went a bit wrong when he went to get a futon mattress for the bed he'd made. They didn't have a mattress that would fit, and he flew into this irrational rage, and it really scared her. And as the months went on and Delia saw more and more of his temper and his boozing and, you know, smoking loads of drugs and just becoming more and more controlling, like not letting her do things. You're not allowed to go here.
All the red flags.
Yep. Well, Delia knew she'd made a big mistake letting this guy into her life and into her flat, especially as he became more and more controlling and violent as well towards her. Then one day, John showed Delia some of his drawings because, like I said, he loved to paint and sketch and draw. And there was one that he'd drawn of him with this pretty girl. And Delia asked, "Who's that?" And he said, "Oh, that was my American girlfriend, Melissa." And Delia was like, "All right, well, what happened to her? Where's she now?" He didn't answer. So we're going to rewind a bit into John's past.
Okay.
Like I said, John grew up outside of Liverpool with a sister and 2 brothers. And at 20, he met and married a local girl called Anne Bramley. But it was a disaster marriage. He was violent, he was a heavy drinker, and eventually Anne, who did end up having 2 kids with John, she finally kicked him out. But John wasn't having it. And one night after Anne had kicked him out, Anne had gone round to the neighbour's house for a coffee and she'd taken the kids with her, and she heard noises next door at her own house. So she was like, "I'm calling the police." They came out. They went to her place to investigate while she was still at the neighbour's house. Police thinking it could be a burglar in the house. An officer entered the house quietly and started to just sort of tiptoe walking through the house, looking to see if anyone was in there. John jumps out from behind a door, swinging an axe and a hammer.
Oh.
Not realising it was a police officer and not Anne.
Yeah.
So obviously bad move, because the police officer managed to not get killed and he was arrested.
And thank God Anne was only next door.
Thank God, because obviously she was the intended victim.
Yes.
But bizarrely, he wasn't charged.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of that. But meanwhile, Anne and the kids were relocated to a secret location. John somehow stalked her and tracked her down.
Oh, no.
And eventually a restraining order was issued, for him to stay away from Anne. And I guess at this point, he knew he just had too much heat on him, because he gave up on Anne and moved to London. And that's when he met the American girlfriend, Melissa. So it's 1986 in London. He's unemployed. He's been doing odd jobs, carpentry all over the UK and Europe for the last few years, trying to make ends meet. But finally, John decides he just needs to settle in London. It seems actually like good luck is shining upon this guy, because he gets a carpentry job on a fashion shoot, and he meets this American model and photographer called Melissa Halstead in December 1986. And the pair immediately hit it off. And I've seen pictures of her in her modelling days. Absolutely gorgeous. She looks a little bit like Margot Hemingway.
Yeah.
She's got that whole kind of like 90s glam, blue eyeshadow, lip gloss, the whole thing. But those modelling days were give or take behind her, and she'd moved into becoming a photographer. And I think she was attracted to his arty side. Plus, she loved to smoke weed. He loved to smoke weed. They both connected. And pretty quickly, he moved in with Melissa. And she loved the good life. She moved him into her flat in Sloane Square. Then they moved to a flat on the King's Road. And for anyone who doesn't know those locations, they are super fancy. Only rich people and, kind of
Harrods, Harvey Nichols.
Yeah. Chelsea. It's the Chelsea set. She loved the good life in that way. She was pretty new to London, and she really enjoyed having a boyfriend, because she didn't have that many friends. So meeting John was good for her, because she had someone to do things with. But it didn't take John long for him to show his true nature, and bit by bit, he became a violent and controlling partner, to the point where he was convicted of assaulting Melissa twice. But for whatever reason, she stayed with him. And this was to the absolute bewilderment of her family back in the Midwest of America, who, when they urged her to leave him, she would just say to them, "But I love him." So in 1987, Melissa's UK visa expired. And in 1988, immigration finally caught up with her and she got deported. And it was at this point that Melissa's family, who did not like John Sweeney at all, they were like, "Come on, this is your chance to leave him. Use the deportation as an opportunity to kind of put this abusive relationship behind you and move on." So she did. She fled to Austria and moved into a flat on her own in Vienna.
Yeah.
But John tracked her down, stalked her, broke into her flat, tied her up, and just physically and I think sexually abused her. And then days later, John attacked Melissa with a hammer, cracking open her skull
Oh my God.
to the point where she needed emergency surgery to survive. Austrian police immediately tracked down and arrested John Sweeney. At this point, Melissa had called her sister in America and had said, if anything happens to me, it's John who's done it. And I'll tell you now, if he gets rid of me, he'll leave nothing behind.
Chilling.
It's horrible. But the other weird thing about all of this is, despite knowing that John was a violent man who had been abusing her for years, Melissa went to the Austrian authorities and appealed to them to please change the charges. And she begged for John's early release from prison. I mean, this is the level of control this guy had over Melissa. You know, that despite him cracking her skull open with a hammer, nearly killing her, basically attempted murder, he had such control over her that he convinced her by being charming and telling her how sorry he was and just pulling the wool over her eyes. He convinced her to petition for his early release. I mean, it's absolutely shocking. So she did that legally, so authorities now were unable to charge him with attempted murder or attempted manslaughter because of Melissa's appeal. He was charged with aggravated assault only and sentenced to 12 months in jail for Melissa's attack. The thing is, in 1989, John was released early and only served 6 months of those 12 months for the hammer attack on Melissa. So when John gets out of jail, he finds Melissa because they're both still in Vienna, and he says to her, come on, let's get back together. Let's have a fresh start. Let's get away from this city. And totally under his spell, Melissa agrees to that fresh start. So they pack up and they move to Amsterdam together, and the pair start a whole brand new life there together. Meanwhile, if you look at this from the outside, he has just been in prison for attacking her, moves her under the guise of, fresh start, to a place where she has no friends,
no safe haven,
no connections, no family, no work. He is the one and only in her life. He's
isolated her. Classic.
Yep, absolute classic behaviour. In the beginning, things seemed to be going great for these two. But of course, the cracks started to appear, the physical and mental abuse started up again, and Melissa felt even more trapped. Then, after a few months, and we're talking April 1990, John and Melissa's landlord in Amsterdam had come back from the Easter holidays and had to go round to the flat where they were living to check on something or other, only to find the apartment completely empty. No possessions, no sign of them. The pair had just up and left. Then, on the 3rd of May, so just a few days later, in Rotterdam, 2 boys, young boys, see a duffel bag floating on the river.
Oh, no.
And inside this duffel bag were the remains of a dismembered female body, tied up with rope. And I read in one report that there were no hands and no head inside that duffel bag.
So you can't identify the body.
And being the late 80s, there was no way to identify the body at that stage with DNA because the forensics were just not advanced enough. After a very poor and very quick investigation, the body in the bag was shelved as a cold case. A few months later, Dutch authorities get a call from Melissa Halstead's family in America. They're calling because they're concerned for her welfare, as they had not heard from her in 6 months. Now, these were the days of no mobiles, and if you didn't have a number or an address for a person, they were as good as uncontactable. Yeah. Her family, knowing that Melissa was a bit of a free spirit and sort of out there in the modelling and photography world, they knew she was just living her life and they hoped she'd call, but she didn't. And finally, they contacted the police, who went round to the last known address, which was completely empty. They did a forensic sweep of the flat, found no evidence of foul play at the flat, so no blood, no nothing. And without any evidence and no way of contacting the couple, because there was no forwarding address, the Dutch police concluded that no crime had occurred and they dropped the whole thing. And for some bizarre reason, Melissa was never reported or documented as missing.
Right.
So John Sweeney has slipped through the net.
Oh, my God.
Until 12 months later, when John pops up in London where he meets Delia Balmer.
Right.
So, back to Delia's situation. After 2 years of emotional abuse, things between John and Delia were at rock bottom. Delia wanted out of this relationship. She wanted John out of her flat, but she was scared of what he might do to her if she sort of said, you've got to get out. So she just sort of kept quiet until she could figure out a plan. Delia had made a friend called Martine, but whenever Delia would try to meet up with Martine, John would get abusive, and then she would leave the house and John would follow her.
Oh, no.
So that was sort of the pattern. You know, he was constantly following her and checking on her movements. But one day, after a massive row, Delia decided she was going to go and see Martine. So she left the house expecting John to follow her like he always did. But this time he didn't. Actually, Delia said it felt like a relief.
Right.
So she went to Martine's. They had a great day going from pub to pub and enjoying some drinks to the point where she just thought, I don't want to go home. And she stayed the night at Martine's house. And it was just what Delia needed. But when Delia went home the next day...
I can imagine that didn't go down well.
No, he was fucking furious. And they had another huge argument that went on for hours and hours.
Oh, my God.
And finally, Delia was just exhausted and she's like, I'm going to shut this argument down. I'm going to bed. She went to bed, and it was while she was lying in bed that John came into the room and he reached down to the bottom of the bed where, unbeknownst to Delia, he'd attached ropes to the bed, waiting for this moment.
Oh, no.
So first of all, he tied one ankle, then the other. He grabbed her arms, tied her wrists to the bed, where he then physically and sexually and verbally abused her all night long.
Oh, God.
All the while keeping a long, sharp kitchen knife by the side of the bed.
Oh, God.
So when Delia didn't show up for work the next day at the hospital, where she was temping as an agency nurse, one of her colleagues called the house to find out, are you coming in? John answered the phone, and he made up some story that Delia had to go away for an emergency. But there was a colleague of Delia's called Rosie who just didn't buy it. She'd known a little bit of Delia's rough time with the relationship with John. So she calls back the house and John picks up and she says, if Delia isn't here by 12 today, I'm calling the police and I'm sending them round to the flat.
Right.
And John freaks out because this is not in the plan. You know, he's got Delia tied up on the bed.
That's also pushing him into a place that he didn't reckon on, if you know what I mean. So it could have been a very bloody dangerous maneuver on Rosie's part.
But Rosie didn't know that he was...
That psychotic.
He had her tied... Yeah, psychotic, tied her up to the bed, had a knife there. Yeah. She just thought, oh, God, you know, as he smacked her around.
But she must have known he was dangerous.
She probably thought he'd smacked her around and she didn't want to come in because she had a black eye or something. Who knows?
Okay, right.
I mean, my mind wouldn't go to he's tied her up and he's basically raping her all night long. So John is like, you need to call her back. He forces Delia to go to the phone and Delia says, listen, I'm fine, but I won't be in today, but I will be back for my next shift, which is 5 days away.
Oh, shit.
Rosie doesn't know what to do, so she just leaves it because she's spoken to Delia and Delia's like, I'm okay. And over the next 5 days, John tortures Delia, sexually assaults Delia, threatens to kill her. She's basically a prisoner in her own home.
God. I don't think I can watch this TV show.
Well, I don't know if any of this is in the TV show. This is all in the documentary.
Crumbs.
Miraculously, he unties her and lets her go back to work because that's what she said to Rosie. That's what's going to happen.
She must have been in the absolute shell of herself.
Oh, look, the colleagues took one look at her and saw all her cuts and bruises and they were like, you've got to go to the police.
Yeah.
But Delia knew if she went to the police, it would make things worse for her. And also, she just didn't have any faith in the police. She thought they're not going to do much. She didn't think that they would protect her. She also thought, look, he's raped me, he's abused me, but he hasn't killed me. You know, are they going to believe me? So even though she didn't know what to do, she just thought, I can't report him if I want to live. So she thought, I need to find a way out of this. And then John tells her, hey, I'm going off to Germany to do some carpentry work. And she was like, boom, this is my moment.
Change the locks.
That's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
She changed the locks. But Geordie, even though the locks were changed, she did not feel safe.
No.
And also too, he did not tell her how long he'd be gone for. So she was just on tenterhooks the whole time, just like, am I going to see him outside the flat? What's going on? Then one night, she opened the door to the flat. He's inside.
Oh, no.
And he's fucking livid at her for changing the locks. And he's screaming at her, why did you do that? And he grabs her by the throat, gets his hands, sticks his fingers down her throat and rips and shreds the inside of her throat with his nails. He then knocks her down, drags her through the living room, ties her up and assaults her again and again over the next few days.
You said you weren't going to go into detail.
Well, I didn't. I thought these were like the...
I needed graphic content warning.
Oh, sorry. Graphic content. You got the warning at the beginning. Sorry.
Okay, I wasn't prepared.
But look, the thing is, he did this to her. He just assaulted her again and again over the next few days. She's tied up.
Oh, my God.
When Delia didn't show up for work again on the Monday, her colleagues this time knew exactly what was going on, and they rang the police.
Call the popo.
Yep,
Yep.
and they immediately went to the flat. And when they arrived, John said to Delia, you go to the door and you tell them everything is fine. She's like, yep, okay, yep, I will. So she walks to the door. She calmly opens the door. She sees it's the police, and she just pushes past them, runs into the street. The police realise, fuck, something's going on here. They barge in. They arrest John Sweeney for various offences, including assault. And when the police search the flat, they really go forensic on the flat. They go behind the bath panel and they find a murder kit bag, which contained a tarpaulin, ropes, duct tape, knives, and more.
Oh, God.
So basically, he was arrested and taken to prison. But in what I can only say is absolutely fucking ridiculous, in the lead up to Christmas of 1994, the UK was doing this weird thing where in December 94, there was an amnesty where prisoners in custody for certain offences could be released temporarily to go have Christmas with their families.
What the fuck? I don't remember that.
John Sweeney was let out.
Oh, my God.
Now, Delia had been assured by police, absolutely no way was John Sweeney getting bail. 100% he will be in jail and you can feel safe, you can feel protected. But obviously what she didn't know was that John had been let out because of this amnesty. They didn't tell her. And when she did find out, she rang the police and said, this guy is going to come for me. I know he's going to try and kill me.
Yeah.
They didn't believe her and they didn't protect her. And just like she warned, he made a beeline straight for Delia when he was released. So one night after work, as she was walking up the steps to her flat carrying her bike, John appears out of nowhere. He grabs her and begins beating her with the handle of a wooden axe. He's got the axe. He's smashing her in the head with the axe handle. He's smashing her in the arms with this axe handle, trying to subdue her before he fully attacks her with this axe. Delia's there, now with 2 broken arms.
Oh, shit.
Because he's smashed her. Somehow, she manages to pull the bike on top of her for a bit of protection.
Yeah.
But John is not going to let her out of this alive. So he swings the axe and it cuts through the bike and into her chest. He then pulls the axe up, swings it again, and cuts into her thigh. And thank God the bike is on top of her because it is giving her that little bit of protection, but it's not enough, Geordie. Then she sees John with the axe, like swung over his head, ready to bring it down on her and finish her off. And she is absolutely screaming, her arms over her face. And she says she knows she's about to die. Then, out of nowhere, her neighbour, who had heard the screams and had seen John attacking Delia with an axe, he comes out with a baseball bat and smashes John over the back with this baseball bat.
Oh, my goodness.
John, thank God, drops the axe and runs, leaving Delia fighting for her life. And this fucking hero neighbour was there having to cope with this situation. Yeah. He calls an ambulance. She gets rushed to hospital, literally on the verge of death, with a finger chopped off and life-threatening injuries. And she's like, I just wanted to die.
Yeah.
John, on the other hand, flees to the house of his ex-wife, Anne Bramley.
Back up in Skelmersdale?
Well, she'd gone to a secret location, but he tracked her down.
Oh, no.
But he obviously all along knew where she was. He flees to her house. She's like, what the fuck? Obviously, is probably too scared to say, get the hell away from me.
Yeah.
And clearly the police think, well, they don't even think of Anne as somewhere where he would go. Because police up and down the country are on the full hunt for John Sweeney.
Yeah.
Because they're like, he's armed, he's dangerous. But after weeks of searching, they don't find him. And once again, John evades the police and slips through the net. Turns out, after he'd stayed a couple of nights with Anne Bramley, he goes back to London, changes his name, spends the next 5 years living in London, doing odd jobs.
He never went back to prison?
Nope. Hiding in
Holy
plain
shit.
sight.
Oh, God.
And the thing is, Delia didn't die. And in fact, once she'd recovered from her injuries, she helped police with new information, including a story John had told her about his ex-girlfriend, Melissa.
Right.
He'd told Delia, while they were living in the apartment in Amsterdam, he had come home one day and found Melissa in bed with 2 German dudes and had shot all 3 of them.
Oh.
Sounds like bullshit to me.
Yeah.
He said, I didn't know what to do with the bodies, so I sat with them for 3 days and then I cut them all up and threw them into the canal.
Well, that's enough info for them to go looking.
Well, the police did take Delia's story seriously. So the UK police alerted the Dutch authorities about this allegation. And they said, actually, we did find a body in the Rotterdam Canal in 1990, and it tallies up. But another dismembered female body in a suitcase had been found in near identical circumstances 2 years later in Amsterdam.
Oh, my God.
This time with the fingertips removed. So they did not know who this second person was. Either way, they did think one of these women could be Melissa Halstead. So they asked Melissa's family for a DNA sample, but the samples were negative and Melissa's disappearance remained a mystery. Skip forward to 10 years later to London's Regent's Canal.
Yeah. What year is this now then? 2002?
2001.
2001. Okay.
So 3 young boys find some duffel bags in the Regent's Canal that contain the remains of a dismembered body. 5 duffel bags in total.
5? Oh, that's one body in 5, across 5 bags.
Across 5 bags, bricks, the works, trying to weigh these duffel bags down. Head and hands and feet are missing.
Imagine being those children opening those suitcases.
Oh my God, it's fucking horrible. Horrible. That is the stuff of nightmares. But shortly after, the body that was in these 5 duffel bags was identified as 31-year-old Liverpudlian woman Paula Fields. She'd moved from Liverpool to London, looking for a better life, but she'd hit hard times and ended up sort of in a bit of a spiral of drugs and sex work. And when they looked into her background, they found she'd been seeing a guy called Joe Scouse.
Right.
And the police were like, we need to find this guy. So with a bit of detective work, they tracked down this guy, Joe Scouse, to a house in Digby Crescent in Finsbury Park. But when they went there was absolutely no trace of Joe Scouse. But there was a man living there called Anthony Sweeney. Now, the whole thing was a bit suspicious. So undercover cops decided, we're going to keep tabs on Anthony. And while they were surveilling him, they saw him meet up with a man who was in fact Anthony's older brother, John Sweeney. He'd been wanted by the police for years. And here he was.
For over 10 years,
yep,
yeah.
living round the corner from Delia the whole time. In plain sight.
Shit a brick.
Biding their time, the police finally arrested John Sweeney. And once he was arrested, they searched his flat. And they found guns, ammo, a machete, a garrote, wigs. This guy was either planning something more or he'd done other bad things over the years. And in 2001, John Sweeney was charged with the attempted murder of Delia Balmer and the suspicion of murder of Paula Fields. Unfortunately, the police didn't have enough evidence to pin the murder of Paula on John, so that case was dropped and closed. But John was charged with the attempted murder of Delia and was given a life sentence with a minimum of 9 years. That's it. Meaning he could be out.
How's that life?
Yeah, life, parole in 5 years. 9 years. So this meant he could be out in 2011. But the police were not done with John Sweeney and they continued to investigate him. And that's when they found John's artwork and poetry, which would prove Geordie to be his undoing.
Yes, because it had pictures of, what's her name again? Melissa.
But they also found self-portraits where he called himself the Scalp Hunter. Yeah. They found poetry about Melissa. They found sketches of his crimes. They found artworks about Delia. And if you looked at the pictures closely, there were hidden messages about the killings in his art.
Really?
Yep. Written words. There were poems about Melissa. There was one, I mean, they're not very good poems, that read, chopped into bits, fed to the fish.
Oh, God.
But Melissa's death was the jurisdiction of the Dutch police. So the British police couldn't do anything until 2008 when a newly formed cold case unit was formed in Rotterdam and they got in touch with the UK police about Melissa's case because they'd found a blood sample in the case file of the body in the canal. They'd run it through their database and it had come up as a match for Melissa. So now what they had was a clear connection between John Sweeney, Melissa Halstead, because they'd now clearly identified Melissa, and Paula Fields, because they had identified that John had been Joe Scouse and that he had been in relationships with these women when they went missing. So they could now link these cases. He was the common denominator, and for Melissa's family, her remains had finally been identified.
Oh, they were finally identified.
Yes, they had the remains.
I thought that they weren't hers, though, because the DNA samples came back as negative.
Well, there'd been advances in the blood samples.
Oh, right. Okay.
So finally, these Jane Does, because there were two, one in Rotterdam, one in Amsterdam, one of them now finally had been confirmed as Melissa. And I think that would give a lot of closure to the family. So, an international murder squad was formed to try and get a conviction against John before John was potentially released in 2011.
Blimey.
But when police went to Delia to try and get her to help them with the case, she was like, nope, not going to do it. I cannot go through that trauma again.
Oh.
They wanted her support, but she just did not have it in her to go through it. And in the end, they didn't need her testimony because they had enough evidence, and John was charged with 2 counts of murder at the trial at the Old Bailey in 2011, just weeks before he was eligible for parole. And despite there being no forensic evidence for Paula and Melissa, it was John's own artwork that brought him down because the images, the words, the jokes in the drawings, his poetry, that convinced the jury this guy was a sick serial killer. Mm-hmm. So after a 5-week trial, he was found guilty of all the charges and ordered to spend the rest of his life in prison with no parole. Ever.
Wow.
He is now considered one of Britain's worst serial killers.
Yeah.
But now the question remains, Geordie, are there other murders? In Germany,
I'd say so.
in UK,
yeah.
in Holland. And look, apparently there are 3 other possible women in London that may be linked to John Sweeney, but there's no hard evidence. And in all likelihood, we probably won't know ever.
And he's not talking.
No. But he's still doing his artwork and he's still drawing pictures of Delia.
Oh, God.
He's fucking sick.
And Delia feels okay about going on Channel 5 documentaries and having her story dramatised for TV shows, which he's bound to see.
I don't know her motivation for doing it.
I'd leave the country if I were you, Delia. I don't know. I just don't feel safe for her.
Well, she's sleeping in that fucking bed that he made.
I'd have chopped that up into tiny pieces and burnt it.
Me too, but she's still sleeping in that bed. Like I said, she's quite an unusual character. She is not portrayed that nicely in the series compared to her speaking her truth on the documentary. But I will link up both of these on the Patreon, and people, you can decide for yourself.
Absolutely fascinating, Michelle. That is really odd. That whole story, like how he managed to get away with it for so long. I guess, timing had a lot to do with it as well.
I think it's harder these days to slip through the net.
Yeah.
These days it's harder and harder to get cash in hand jobs. It's harder just to change your name. It's harder to slip through without having credit cards and mobile phone bills and all of that stuff. I think it's a lot harder to do what he did, but serial killers will find a way.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay, Michelle, that's your big old one-hander done and dusted. It is quite a shocker. And of course, because we were both going to talk about murder today, you guys get to hear another horrifying murder from me next week. I hope it's not too over the top and too much to bear, because I think that maybe what people should do in the meantime is think about their hot posties and whether they have one. Do write in. We want to know, what's your postie like? Do you have a good relationship with them?
Do you leave them jam roly-polies for Christmas?
Well, that's going to go off. I think a biscuit. A nice biscuit or a chocky is better. Not rum, because they may not be drinkers. So obviously you've got to be thoughtful when you give a gift to a postie. Also, Patreon. Check out our advice column over there. And remember,
wherever you are,
whatever you do, just keep eavesdropping. 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 Dropping. Eavesdropping. Dropping. Eavesdropping. Eavesdropping. Dropping. Dropping.